Welcome to Scotland Speaks for our last show before the Christmas and New Year break. Now, Alex and I had planned for the next couple of weeks it would be showing you some of the bloopers or mistakes that we'd made over the past year. It doesn't seem appropriate for us to do that at this moment in time, but maybe in due course we might find an appropriate opportunity when we're all up to it to look at some of the fun that we had on set. You remember in our shows last year over the Christmas period, we played you out some of the mistakes that, of course, Alex would make while filming, and there's been plenty more in the year since. And some of you may not realise that those of us who had the good luck to spend so much time with Alex were aware of such a great sense of humour, that he had such wit and encouragement, and it was so much fun to work with him. And often he would argue with me offset, but on camera, because the camera was still rolling, about what we should do next, or what the next segment should be, or indeed what the next introduction should be to the next part of the show. And we would have that between the two of us, and eventually he would give in and say, okay, we'll do it your way then. And then I would leave the room and he'd tell the whole crew Taz was actually right. But that was Alex Salmond, such a great man and truly missed on this show. And on that note, can I take this opportunity to thank you again for the lovely messages you sent in after last week's show. It is very difficult for myself and the team here at Scotland Speaks to keep going, but it is your messages that do keep us going. You say such nice things and it means so much to us to hear from you. And you made lovely comments about Corey and Alan Ross who we had in the studio last week, and shortly we'll play those out before the break so you can see them. But please do keep them coming in, and please do keep writing in with your stories. The email address is the show at alexsalmond.scot, and in the new year, with a new set. It may well be a new set, but the memories of Alex will remain, and we will continue to talk about him in every show. I plan to read out your stories and invite you to come in and tell the stories yourself. Now, we on this show will remember Alex every single week, and not just because we want to, but because we have to. Because in this past week, you will have seen people trying to rewrite history. First of all, his former party, which he led to great success, successfully wrote him out of the history on the SNP website. But now they've turned to trying to write him out of his achievements. Thankfully, all of you know what they were, and we will make sure we use this platform to remind everybody else who might be hearing for the first time just what a great leader and First Minister Alex Salmond was, and what a great loss he is to the cause of independence. Now, there's much information swirling about, and some of you know some of the facts, and some of us know all of the facts about securing justice for Alex. So let me just say this. We will work hard to ensure that justice for Alex Salmond is achieved and the truth is out. Because only when the truth is out can Scotland truly be set free. We want an independent Scotland that is just and honest, led by people who understand that justice matters, honesty and integrity matters. Now, back to last week's show, and here's some comments from Corey Wilson, Deputy General Secretary of the Alba Party, and Alan Ross, and your comments that you sent in last week to follow.
In 2015, he came down to Cumnock for a big event for my campaign. Now, there must have been over 150 people in Cumnock Town Hall, and the atmosphere was electric. Now, bear in mind, there's a Keir Hardie statue outside Cumnock Town Hall, and they must be turning in his grave when he sees what's going on now. But that event was just absolutely incredible. And then, as you say, we got elected and we went down there. And for many of us, the reality is we were a bit green behind the ears going down there. So we looked to Alec to have that sort of mentoring and give us some advice about how we take things forward, and again, he's just his confidence in, he knew the system, he knew what to do, he knew what to ask, but it was quite obvious though, there was a huge amount of respect from him from across the political parties. But Alec being Alec in the chamber, he never missed and hit the wall, that was for sure.
That was a brilliant day as well. We started off at the Lochie Larder, which is a food bank stroke cafe, which does a lot of great work in the local area, and he spent, as he did, a good amount of time with the people there, chatting to them, really interested in what the project was doing. And then we went out into Lochie High Street, and we were in Posh Nosh Cafe, and a similar story to Corey's about the people who wouldn't necessarily go and vote, but this young lad was, oh, you're that, I've seen you on the TV, and it was just, you know, he would speak to anybody in the same way, in the same level, you know, and then we went inside the cafe, and there was a lady in there that obviously, you know, recognised him, and he sat down and had a cup of tea with her, and I don't think the people who owned the cafe could really quite believe what was happening, you know, because it was just a spur of the moment thing. And then after that we went chapping doors. And the one thing I'll always remember about that day, and will remember forever, was just before he got back in the car, he was going to Glasgow Airport, and just it kind of came from nowhere, just this enormous bear hug. And I think he said something like, well done, son, or something like that. And, you know, I'd spoke to him after that on the phone, but that was the last time I actually saw him in person. And, you know, little did I know how much that hug was going to mean.
Now we're going to head inside to interview Mike Dailly, who is of course the solicitor advocate, ably assisted by my good friend and KC Joanna Cherry in the Fannings case, and also Josh Robertson, who's been conducting and is conducting public meetings across the country with the Fannings. And also we've got a very special announcement in this week's show about Alex Salmond. All of that coming up after the break. Welcome back to Scotland Speaks. Now, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our next guest into the studio. I've spoken about the Fannings case in these episodes over the past couple of weeks, and today we're joined by the solicitor advocate Mike Dailly, who's acting in the case alongside my good friend Joanna Cherry, who's the KC. And this is the case of the Fannings and another against the Secretary of State for the Department of Work and Pensions and Scottish Government ministers, and Josh Robertson, an Alba Party activist who's also been working with the Fannings in public meetings across the country. Mike Dailly, Josh Robertson, welcome to Scotland Speaks, and it's very kind of you to join me here in the studio. As you know, we are endeavouring to continue with the show and make sure that we pay tribute to the man behind the show, Alex Salmond, and of course, particularly in relation to the subject of today's discussion, Mike, I'm going to come to you first, of Alex's involvement and support for the case, the Fannings case. I'm going to ask you to give a bit of personal reflection about Alex, if you may.
No, absolutely. It's a great honour to be here, Tasmina. I mean, in terms of, the whole winter fuel payment and ideas in terms of should it be challenged, I mean, it was really Alec that was the spark in that. As I had been out hill walking with my son at Loch Lomond, I got a phone call from Alec, and that's when I said to him, actually, I think we could do something about this. And we then had further discussions. And there was some authorities from other parts of the UK, and I think what then happened was Alec put out some press, before anything had happened, to say, why doesn't the Scottish Government do something about this? Because the Scottish Government could have taken the UK Government to court. And I thought that was a very good strategy.
I think he encouraged his successor, John Swinney, predecessor and successor, John Swinney, to do precisely that.
He did, and I thought that was very generous, because it would have been a battle that would, I think, have made many Scots proud. For the Scottish Government to have challenged perhaps one of the most egregious. I was going to say that one of the most egregious decisions in terms of pensioners in recent years, but then one only has to consider what's happened this week in terms of what's happened to 3.8 million women that were born in the 1950s, and they've effectively been robbed of when the pension age went up from age 60 to 65, then 66. And
this is the WASPy women we're talking about.
That's right, and we know from the independent ombudsman analysis of all of that the UK government was involved very much in the 2010s in maladministration. And so that's an absolute travesty. So to have the winter fuel payment cut, and then to have, the in terms of WASPy, in terms of 1950s, women that were born in the 1950s, to be deprived. And we're only talking about, I think the recommendation was to £1,000 to £3,000 per woman. But coming back to the winter fuel payment, I mean, the reason this is particularly, I think, emotional is you're talking about people not being able to put their heating on during the cold winter months. And I think certainly that's what really motivated Alec, and he said that to me. And so what we then did was we obviously were trying to look to find, do we have a possible client? And to be fair, Alec and yourself were incredibly helpful in that regard. And fast forward to where we are now, and because there's been a lot of work done, I can assure you, and we have the case, as you say, of Fanning against the Secretary of State for Works and Pensions and the Scottish Ministers.
You mentioned, Mike, that Alex cared greatly about the fact that pensioners were going to be freezing, and I know that you've made many comments online about how you, with many others, want to ensure that we get justice for Alex himself and what a great loss he is to Scotland. I just wanted to ask you a bit more about your feelings about Alex as the person before we get on to more about the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think where we are now in Scotland is a pretty grim place, because you just have to look around and realise that people are disillusioned with the mainstream parties. The recent by-elections we had, say, in Glasgow, got turnouts of 13 to 16%. And the last decade in Scotland's been a tragedy because, I mean, let's be fair, and I wasn't always, I mean, I was critical of Alec back in the day, let's be honest, and he knew that.
I recall well, as will the viewers, Mike.
Well, they will. But, that was the measure of Alec, that he gave as good as he got. And if you think back to when Alec first formed his administration as a minority government in 2007, he was managed to do incredible things, even although he didn't have a majority. And it's a legacy of building schools, building hospitals, building bridges, making things happen, doing things in terms of progressive justice. You look at the last nine years or so, and it's been an absolute disaster. It's been, I think, a travesty of obsessions with identity politics. The very kind of hobby horse politics, say, of the Scottish Greens, and my sort of enduring memory of speaking to Alec was that what he conveyed to me was, what we need to do is get back into the bread and butter issues. That's what people care about. People care about their homes, people care about health, they care about education, they care about public services, they care about access to justice. and they care about pensioners not getting the ability to get the winter fuel payment to put their heating on. That's what they care about, and I think Alex Salmond got that. He got it more than anybody, and that's what we're missing now in Scotland, because who have we got to champion that now? I mean, obviously, I think Alpha are in a good position because, okay, they're a newer, smaller party, but they're not bogged down with the problems of all the other parties. The failed promises, the deception, the dishonesty. I mean, just looking at Labour in terms of the WASPy women, UK Labour and Scottish Labour promised that they would fix that and that they would get compensation. And we've just heard this week that that's not happening. Mm-hmm. You can't keep on lying to people, being dishonest with people. I think if you keep doing that, as I said, that disconnect between the electorate and the political system and politicians is going to break down. Mm-hmm. And that's how I think the legacy of Alex surely must be the Alba Party is in a good place to pick up seats in 2026 in the Lloyd re-election.
Now, understanding, greatest strategist I think Scotland has ever seen, in fact beyond that, internationally even, and he was very keen that you have to, when moments come in politics, you have to seize the moment and seize the initiative. Yeah. And I recall, Mike, just the day before we lost Alex, he'd said to me, get Mike on the phone, let's check where we are with the case, because he knew how important it was that we kept up the impetus and we kept things going. And Josh, that brings me to you, and just speak briefly about the Fannings case, and then I'm going to come on to your family history with the SNP, and then of course with Alex. Now, we lost Alex on the 12th of October, but on the 18th of October, myself and Alex were due to attend a public meeting that you'd organised with the Fannings. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, Taz. I mean, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's such an honour to be able to reminisce the time that we had with Alex, although I don't pretend to know him as well as other people did. I cherish the moments that we did have together, and I think Mike was talking a wee bit earlier on about how Alex came up with the idea, and I always remember the NEC meeting we had when he was talking about how the First Minister wasn't progressing the case positively, and he made just an off-the-hand comment with that smile that he had, we've got something planned, and you knew with the kind of cheeky wee grin that Alex had that it was going to be something good, and then lo and behold it comes out of the strategic masterclass of using the Fannings, which I think is pivotal to the case of someone that's relatable, someone that has the issues at heart, and that was Alex's real quality, I think, of being able to not only think strategically about how to put pieces together, but actually to have faith in people and to pick people. And Alex knew how to choose people that were going to develop the cause or to progress the cause in a positive way. And I think just the choice of being able to work with Peter was, again, a strategic masterclass from Alex. But it was, again, I think when we were having the discussions just before you flew out to Macedonia, that were a big, long NEC meeting. But again, the key points were, how do we make sure that Alapa is out in front and centre? How do we make sure, as Mike was talking about there, that Alapa are connecting with the people, with the causes that actually matter to them, and none of the bumf? And by coming along to a community centre in Airdrie on a Friday night in between other meetings, that just summed Alec up. And as ever, when I phoned yourself to organise it, it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a case of, I'm all the way up in Stricken, that's a 6-hour drive there and back. It was, what's the time and when can I be there? And that summed Alec up, I think.
And the same was the case when we had the initial press conference, Mike, that your team, excellent team of female lawyers were at, in the hotel in Edinburgh. Again, it was an early start for Alex, but he was there, and we'll just play some photos of that over our discussion, because he was excellent in that press conference, as were Peter and Flo Fanning. So let's turn to Peter and Flo for a minute. We'll play out shortly some of the interview with Good Morning Britain. I think they must have been some of the best guests that show has ever had, simply because of their ability to articulate so well in a manner that people understand what they had gone through, because it wasn't just the fact that they fitted the age profile, it was health conditions that are a problem also.
No, absolutely, and I think you're right, Tasmin. I think the kind of the power to be able to communicate, as Mr. and Mrs. Fanning have done, what does this mean for people that are affected? And let's remember, often I think, for example, some people in the Labour government would make out, we don't want, Lord Sugar doesn't need a winter fuel payment, does he? Well, maybe no, maybe he doesn't, you know. And but if you think about, there's almost 1 million people eligible for pension credit in the UK, but don't claim it, and they never do claim it. And this idea you're going to get them to claim it is Walter Mitty stuff, right? To get winter fuel payment now in Scotland or the rest of the UK, you've got to be in just about £11,000 a year. We know, because there's been some statistics done on this, that there's literally, you know, several million people that are over that, but you would still consider them to be relatively on very low incomes. So they're the people, i.e. Peter and Flo Fanning, they're the people, they're the kind of the stereotypical couple that have worked hard all their life are going to be losing out this winter. And I think that is, you know, that is so powerful to think about, well, that could be my granny, that could be my papa. Do you know what I mean? And I think, you know, I really think the whole policy on the winter fuel payment is just so wrong. And I have to say, if you think about what at least the Northern Ireland Assembly's done, it's given people of state pensionable age in Northern Ireland £100 this winter. Now, the Scottish Government could have done that, but they haven't done that. They're talking about doing it next year.
So the announcement, to be clear, was yes, there will be some form of mitigation, but not this year. We're talking about the winter of 25 into 26.
Yes, that's exactly. And I don't think that necessarily came across in the way it was presented, but absolutely right, Tasmania. So that's you know, that's of no use in terms of the here and now.
So tell us about the here and now. In a nutshell, what is the case about, and where are we in it?
It's a complicated case. I should say, having done the draft petition with Joanna Cherry KC, it's a very long document, and it is quite. But in a nutshell, I'll try and distill it down. So the primary challenge is very much about the failure, the petitioners allege, on the part of the UK government and the Scottish ministers. Because let's remember, the Scottish ministers just rubber stamped what they got from the UK government. And they don't deny that. Their position is, well, we couldn't do anything else. And we say, well, but that's not true, because they did in Northern Ireland, didn't they? The UK government's position is, oh, well, you know, it was really urgent, you know, and yeah, we didn't do any consultation. We didn't do any proper quality impact assessment in terms of, and that's under the Public Sector Equality Duty under the 2010 Equality Act. And that's about saying, right, okay, any new policy, any minister or public body has to do the Public Sector Equality Duty. And you have to say, right, what does this mean for people with protected characteristics, i.e. people who, for example, were frail, disabled, and elderly? What does this mean for them? And if we take this money away from them, what will be the impact, for example, on their financial well-being, but what will be the impact on their health? Now, we already have some general kind of information that it ain't going to be good. But the reason that you have to go through that process in terms of that duty in law is so you could then say, well, what can we do to mitigate it? And in truth, the UK government's done nothing to mitigate it. What they've basically said is, we'll take it down to the very, very lowest bar, you know, the bare bone, which is pension credit. And that is like tiny. And that's all they did. And they never did any of the work that they should have done. So that's our primary challenge. And our challenge is, yes, okay, our clients live in Coatbridge, but we're blaming you because we accept that you did put the Scottish Government into a position that it would not have been in but for you doing this, right? So we go, oh, we're challenging you on that. Then we say, but we're also challenging you, the Scottish Government, because you've got devolved powers. And of course, it's all now devolved in terms of the winter fuel payment to the Scottish Government. Now, here's the other thing very quickly. Once we got the defences from both governments, we then thought we would add in 2 additional cases. As you do, as a good lawyer, you think, well, hang on, we can add in some additional cases. So we added one on rationality, and that's very much based on, given the information that both governments knew, it was, I put it simply, it was completely bonkers to go ahead with the decision that they did with no mitigation. And then we've put in a European Convention of Human Rights argument under Article 3, which is the right to life and the right to dignity, as read with Article 8, which is the right for respect for private and family life. Now, the UK government and the Scottish Government's council wanted to get more time for that to be considered. So effectively, the case has been pushed back a little bit. So it's now been set down for 2 days, and that's going to take place on the 13th and 14th of March. And the other good news is in terms of the financial, because you know that in terms of legal aid, unless you're on basically completely means-tested benefits, you have to pay quite a big contribution. So in terms of Mr. and Mrs. Fanning's case, the RMT Scotland and RMT have made donations, and we've also got a donation that's going to take care of the rest of the sum in terms of legal aid board contribution. We're going to announce that very soon. We just have to get that fully confirmed, but that's going to be, you know, a huge relief to Mr. and Mrs. Fanning, because, you know, basically they're putting their head on the chopping block for 10 million people, which is a pretty brave thing to do.
Indeed. Now you mentioned March because, of course, well, Scotland, the winter can go on for an extended period of time. But for the main part, a lot of the worst and coldest days will have passed. And it's of great sadness, of course, that nothing can be done quickly enough to help pensioners. However, it is very important that both governments understand that they can be challenged if they're not fulfilling their requirements in terms of impact assessments. And of course, the human rights angle is an interesting one that you've introduced. The idea of rationality and governments being bonkers, I think you'll have many of the public with you agreeing with that. Josh, you've had the pleasure of spending, as I have, some time with Peter and Flo Fanning. Now, at the press conference that we did in the hotel in Edinburgh, we had a good chat with them, and it's a matter of great sadness because he had to leave pretty much after the press conference that myself and Alex weren't able to take them to lunch. And I've been in a text exchange with Peter to say, I'm sorry we couldn't make that happen, but I will fulfil that for Alex. But you've also had the benefit of spending time with them because you had an online meeting earlier this week and just a couple of days ago, an in-person meeting. Tell us a bit about that, and tell us a bit about Peter and Flo, the people, the pensioners' champions.
I think that Mike summed it up pretty well when he was talking about the social contract side of things, and I think it's something that Alec was so keen about and so forceful about in terms of how you as a society keep it going together, and it's the fact that social contract, i.e. you paid into a system to expect it to benefit you, and no one sums it up better than Peter and Flo Fanning in the way that they've put themselves forward in this case, both putting their heads above the parapet in terms of being targeted when they both don't keep the best all the time, but and also how just they go about their daily lives. In fact, when I was chatting to them the other night, they were sharing with me, they didn't even buy their council house during the Thatcherite years because they knew that they were going to pass it on to somebody else, and that just sums them up. I think that full belief in the social contract of that it wasn't theirs, they were just having a loan of it and to leave it off in a better state for a future generation. And I just think of how that is the antithesis of the current Labour Party when they promised all this change, and they're actually rolling back policies that New Labour put in under Blair under 97. This is when the winter fuel payment was first introduced, and now the new Labour Party are getting rid of even the small tenets of decency that Tony Blair put in. I think that really sums up how far we've kind of fallen in a country in terms of upholding that social contract. And Peter and Flo, they worked all their life paying into their pensions as they were told to do so, that not only their state pension but also the pension that Peter got as working as a social worker or in that field within Glasgow. And it's sickening to think that because they listened to that advice and they paid that wee bit extra as they were told to do, that they're now falling foul of the payments and now fall under that limit. And I think it's such an important case to take forward for that reason, to uphold that social contract that we have, not just for the generation that are expecting this kind of the country to look after them, that they've done a bit, but also for my generation who it seems like if it keeps going on we'll never get a pension or the ability to retire. So I think it's important that young people get involved in this case, because it might seem like certainly from our generation point it's harder now to buy a house back than it was in the day. There's a lot of things that our generation can grumble about, and some of it rightly so, but the point is that we have to make sure that we protect that older generation, because if we don't protect them, then who's going to protect us when we get to that? So it's been an absolute honour to spend some time with Peter and influencing some of the stories he tells are excellent. Some of the work he did as well when he was a social worker and helped young adults with disabilities are absolutely class. It's quite a similar field that I'm in, so we have a good couple of chat whenever I'm in the car or out and about. But I can't think of anyone better to represent in this case, both from the background where they're from, both the difficulties they have. They do have genuine difficulties with this cut that's going to happen to them. It is going to impact their lives, but they've also got the strength and the tenacity to stand up and say this isn't right and we're going to fix it. And so
perfectly exemplified by their ability to hold a room of press in Edinburgh. Not many people can do that, and then on to online meetings, and then public meetings, and then on to addressing millions of people in Good Morning Britain. Let's just take a brief look at some of their interview.
And you're so angry, you're taking them to court.
Yes, it's all about my background in social work kind of makes me look at Equality Acts and things like that. And I don't think that the government has carried out, certainly Westminster government has not carried out a full equality impact assessment, and the Scottish government's not carried out any assessment whatsoever, which means that decisions have been made without looking at what the impact would be on various pensioners. It's as if they've just drew a line in the sand and the people below qualify for the benefit and they're fine, and people above, no matter if you're a penny or £100 or whatever above, then you're cut off and you're not deserving.
And Peter, what will the impact be on you and Flo of losing the winter allowance this December? How will that change your behaviour, how you live this winter?
It'll affect my health. I'm anaemic. I've also got heart problems and various other stuff, and Flo's diabetic. So heat is really important for me during the winter. And knowing that we're getting into the worst winter for a couple of years, according to forecasters, I'm really frightened that, my health will deteriorate. Because one of the things I don't think's been thought out is the healthy pensioners and how cold weather actually affects them. If I end up in hospital, for instance, the winter fuel payment is £300 per year. If I end up in hospital in intensive care because I take pneumonia or something like that, it's £1,600 a day. There's a big difference there. I'm also concerned that, we're putting pressure on our health service just now. It's kind of stretched to the full. But my main concern is although it's personal, and yes, I would love the 300, I think it's about the pensioners who don't have a voice, who, have lived through COVID or maybe still suffering with COVID or have mental health problems, that don't have anyone to back them. I'm in a lucky position that through my contacts from work and whatever, I've got the backing to challenge this. I've also got the courage to challenge it, which other people might not have. I've got backing from Salmond, who's been great in Govan Law Centre, who's been fantastic. So I've got that support, but there are people out there that don't have that support. And that's the ones that I'm fighting for and bringing it.
So Josh, beautifully exemplified by Peter and Flo, how they were able to keep Susanna and Ed Balls in touch with what was happening in Scotland. I mean, let's come to politics, to both of you actually, about politics. You'd mentioned before we just cut to the interview there with Good Morning Britain about New Labour or New Labour or the latest guys. And Mike, you'd also mentioned how not only is the winter fuel payment an issue, now they've upset all WASPy women, and they're being reminded of all the statements that they gave. From a political perspective, Josh, you're in central Scotland, yeah? People voted for Labour in the general election. What are they thinking now?
I mean, I think it's complete and utter betrayal, Taz, it really is. I mean, when I was out delivering leaflets, we were going to be having the postponed meeting. When I was out, it was pensioners and it was young people, and it was actually people who didn't really particularly like the Alippa banner, or maybe weren't sure of Scottish independence. It went deeper than that. This went to the core of what they believed as, a left-leaning area, Central Belt, particularly Coatbridge and Airdrie and Motherwell, which got so devastated through the Thatcher years. But to see the way that, a hope was almost kind of instilled through Labour's campaign. This whole manifesto of change is what they campaigned on. And the change that we've seen is actually that they've been worse than the Tories. I mean, don't take that lightly, the way they've dealt with the WASPy women. You've got the nepotism that was with, at the very start leadership with Sue Gray. And now you have the difficulties that they've got with, the £22 billion hole that they're blaming the Tories for. It seems to be every decision they make is, it's the Tories' fault, it's the Tories' fault. But people feel betrayed because they were promised change. And the change they were expecting was the change of what Labour should promise, what a socialist government should promise, which is that they're going to look after the people with the smallest shoulders. And what they've done is actually looked after the people with the broadest shoulders. I mean, how on earth they can allow even the winter fuel payment to disappear, but actually to allow then the prices to be increased, how they haven't pulled Ofgem over the coals for making sure that the proper policies are put in place to make sure that energy is made cheaper, but in fact to actually increase that as well as reducing the winter fuel payment just sums them up. And I think that betrayal is really going to hamper them in 2026. And I think it's up to Alapa, speaking from someone from Alapa, that we offer people a real hope of change, not just political change in terms of a slogan or a campaign, but actually give people the chance to say, look, these are people who are not interested in getting into politics for politics' sake. They're not interested in doing this to become Chancellor or to become Prime Minister. These are people who are interested in making real change. Now, we believe that comes through Scottish independence, obviously only can do, but I think as a wider Scottish electorate, we have to grasp that opportunity to offer them something different, something that's not just the usual political quagmire that we've been used to for the past 5 years.
Mike, you are one of our newest members of the Alba Party, and we're delighted to have you on board and look forward to hearing more from you at conference, etc. coming up. But from a political perspective, I mean, you've been on a political journey yourself too. What do you think that the people of Scotland are looking for now to the future, given that we know there are less people coming out to vote, they're not inspired to vote, given that we know that reform have found a little niche for themselves without doing particularly much to get any support? Just the fact that they exist seems to be enough, and of course the mainstream media are delighted to give them a platform. What do you think Alba needs to do now, and what does Scotland need to get us back on track, building things, doing things, achieving things and delivering for our people?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Alba needs to do is to demonstrate it has policies which are robust, which are cogent, which are well thought out, but we're actually meaningful and deal with the bread and butter issues that people care about, and not somebody's pet project. I mean, one of the things Alec had said to me at some point was sometimes when a government has run out of ideas, like for example in Scotland in recent years, what you get is the senior civil servant who's got some crazy idea that's been in their top drawer that every previous First Minister's knocked back and said, that's silly. And then you go, well, actually, just give us that idea. And I think over the last few years in Scotland, we've had quite a few of those. And so what Alba needs to do is it needs to show it's got serious, and this was certainly Alec's view. I don't know if you remember, I had him on the Ordinary Elite podcast, yeah. And he was incredibly persuasive, because what he was talking about is we need serious people. Not necessarily people, that are politicians, but he was being very inclusive, but, people that are going to relate to other people as being people that mean business, they want to deliver, and they want to do stuff that will make a difference to people, and things that will make a difference in terms of your day-to-day life, not pie in the sky stuff. And I think Josh is quite right to talk about the betrayals of Labour. I mean, I think back to, say, 97 when Blair got in, and by no means I'm not a Blairite. I was much more fond of Gordon Brown and the working tax credit system that he introduced. But you know what? There was a sense of optimism in 97, because we'd had so many years of the Tories, and there was a sense of and there was lots of good things that initially happened, including, for example, Scottish Parliament being put to the vote. I think back to the July election in the UK, I can't think of any feeling like that. I think it's almost as if Labour got in because everybody just gave up on the Tories. They imploded. And as for the rise of reform, it's perhaps the most undeserved rise in political history. I mean, essentially that was a political party that was owned by Nigel Farage. And we now hear that Elon Musk is going to bankroll him. And we mustn't laugh at that, because that did quite nicely for Donald Trump. So these are all quite terrifying things. The idea that you get these reactionary politicians, which I think go against the grain, certainly, of so many cultural traditions and beliefs in Scotland. I think we're an egalitarian nation. I think we care and I'm not saying other parts of the UK don't care, but I think we do, and I just think the Reform Party has nothing to offer in that regard. And that's why I think there's a major opportunity for ALPA to make a breakthrough. And it's been doing progressively well, going from 4% to 5% to 6%. And if it can just make that small breakthrough, then it would be fantastic. Because I think the Scottish Parliament, as I recall, was always at its best when there was much more mix of different political voices, because that's more healthy. Once you just get one thought process, or the bizarre thing that we had with the Butte Agreement, a tiny party being the dog that wagged the tail that was the government, then we just had disaster in this country. So to me, I don't see any other hope other than, a party like ALPA.
Well, as you mentioned on the podcast, you talked about having a group of very serious people he wanted to present to the public to consider voting for in the 2026 elections, the group that he was going to lead. And we absolutely knew that Alex would go swarming into that parliament and make the changes that Scotland needs for us to make. And Josh, that brings me to you, because you were a candidate in the July elections, and Alex was campaigning with you, and we're going to play. The public will be able to see some of the pictures of that campaign, but just an insight into what he's like, Alex the campaigner, because we were opposite that train station and it was freezing and we all had colds and flu, but he was up for it.
He was determined to be there, Taz. I think they were all at that point. I think he'd been up and down the country. He had been to numerous stops that day. He was struggling from the flu, was coughing. But the highlight for me from that day, I don't know if we were standing across from the train station, we were waiting for cars as they were going past. But there was a group that came off the train, and Alex went, we're going to talk to them. So he pulled me and yourself over to go and speak to them. And the amount of people, wherever Alex went, that would stop and say, it's Alex. So we were standing there and all these young people were coming off, getting on the train. But this again sums Alex up, as people were taking pictures, he was shouting, Josh, get over here. Josh, get into the picture. So it was never about Alex. And a lot of people, going about Alex's ego and all the rest of it. But anyone who knew him knew that his singular focus was Scottish independence, in any way that he could boost that, he would do. And that's what the campaign was for. In Westminster, it was, as Alex set out, it was a stepping stone to give us the credibility to then stand in 26. And I think he was right, because we see the increased vote share in by-elections that Alex was a huge proponent for. He loved, he was so optimistic, and probably something that I definitely learnt the most from him was how to be more optimistic about a party's chances. And he was so optimistic about that. But that key building block of standing in the general election to then the increased results. And I think the last NEC meeting we had, he was overflowing with positivity about 26 and how well we were going to do. And I think it's up to those of us who rallied to Alex in 21 when we first started the party, and those that have joined since, like Mike, to make sure that we deliver that for Alex and make sure that we do deliver a team of serious people with serious ideas on how to deliver on those bread and butter issues, because that's how we're going to achieve Scottish independence, which is what we need to make real change in Scotland. But we're only going to get people to trust in Scottish independence if we can deliver a government that's competent, that has ideas like Alex did. I mean, I'm a direct legacy of a lot of the stuff that Alex implemented. Education. I'm a fluent Gaelic speaker when I was at school. Again, that was all through Alex's increased budget for the board in Gaelic. And we have to be able to take people in who have got professional experience into Holyrood to make sure that we deliver on that kind of stuff. But I mean, just briefly again, Taz, before 21 we stood in the Ravenscraig by-election. I think this sums up Alec as well. We didn't do the best in it. There was numerous difficulties in that campaign. But after it, Alec phoned me up, and I was the convener of the local LICU, and he just phoned me to just congratulate the campaign and say what I'd done well. And we must have spent about 2 hours on the phone, Taz, and he was just telling me, what different things we'd done well, what maybe could have done better. But to be able to do that after a disappointing defeat, it wasn't you're shunned, that wasn't a good result. It was much more, no, that was a good effort, and this is what we can do to go better. And I think that was, for anyone that knew Alec, and I was lucky enough to know him a wee bit, I think that's what they'll remember about him. So we have to make sure that we take that energy, that thinking into the next campaign, take every opportunity we can to show Alep on the front foot. And I think by supporting the Fannings when we did, and the continued roadshows that we've got, hopefully into the new year as well, and showing that foresight of fighting for the bread and butter issues is what's going to take us well into 26. And it's our job, as I said, to make sure that we take Alex's legacy and Alex's ideas that he gave us to fight that campaign.
Absolutely, Josh. Now, Mike, moving back to you, in terms of the case itself, we are now, next date for us is in March when we wait and see what happens. But at the end of the day, what is it you're trying to achieve?
Ultimately, we want to get declarators that the decisions and the policy by UK and Scottish ministers were unlawful, and to get the regulations reduced. And the upshot of all of that is what we're trying to get, Tasmina, is for people to get their original winter fuel payment back in Scotland. But, you know, it would also benefit the rest of the UK if we were successful, which would be absolutely amazing. Now, obviously, both governments are going to fight tooth and nail, but that's okay. We've got a great team, and, you know, we're in it to win it. And
I know all of you are fighting also because it was one of the last things Alex wanted to achieve for pensioners was the restoration of this allowance. So it's just some last reflections from you, Mike, on Alex.
I think as Joss has said, you know, a strategic genius, the likes of sadly we'll not see, probably haven't seen since going back to Wallace, Robert the Bruce, and it's quite sad.
It is. Josh?
Yeah, I think the last time, Taz, that I spoke with Alex just one-on-one was in here, and he said, bring one great thing, Josh, one great thing. And he was talking about a different meeting, Taz, but I think I'll always remember that one great thing, and that one great thing that we have to deliver for him is independence.
Well, thank you both for joining me on Scotland Speaks. I'm going to give you 2 keyrings ordered by Alex with the signature on it that you can keep as a thank you for coming on the show. And I hope to hear from you both again because there's much politics to discuss. Josh, of course, the interview we recorded with you was the last interview that Alex did, and we haven't played that out, but I did say I would give that to you personally for your own keepsake. But thank you both so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks and sharing your reflections about Alex. We're going to continue to talk about Alex for the days, months and years to come because his legacy is long-standing, and unlike others we shall remember it because it's that legacy that's going to take us into a future independent and prosperous Scotland. Coming up after the break, we have a very special announcement and a very special guest, so please do stay tuned and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. change your life.
Welcome back to Scotland Speaks. And as I'd said before the break, we have a very special guest in the studio. But before I introduce her, I want to take the opportunity to thank you in my capacity as chair of the ALBA Party for all of you who've written into me expressing a wish to put on record your thoughts and memories of Alex and to try and find an opportunity to do so. Of course, many of you couldn't attend the memorial, and we thought it was very important to try and create an opportunity for ALBA Party members to be involved in the tributes to Alex. So with that in mind, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Alex Salmond's niece, Christina Hendry, into the studio. Christina, welcome to Scotland Speaks. I should say myself and your uncle had hoped that we'd be able to both interview you, but unfortunately that hasn't been possible. But I'm very grateful to you for coming in, and I hope in due course we'll have more opportunity to speak to you at greater length about Alex's legacy. But for the meantime, you have a very special announcement to make. Tell us a bit about what's going to be happening in January.
Thank you, Taz. So in January, we are going to be hosting an ALBA Party memorial to Uncle Alec. And we felt this was very important, as you'd mentioned, there have been so many messages in to yourself, to the party, to the family, to say that people wanted to have an opportunity to pay tribute to him. And obviously it was a private funeral, and then St Giles, capacity-wise, we couldn't have everybody there, unfortunately. But there were so many people outside St Giles who came to pay their respects, and I spoke to many of them, and so many had said that they were hoping there'd be another opportunity. So this is what we're going to do in January.
Now, I know I can say so, Tina, because I was watching from the audience. You gave a beautiful speech about your Uncle Alex at St Giles, and let's just cut to that so our viewers can have a look at it.
We were more than happy to join him on his political journey, standing alongside those who stood by him. In the past 3.5 years, we've had great fun with him in the ALBA Party. We saw a passion rekindled. Last year, my mum and I took part in his Fringe show with Tasmina and David Davis, The Eyes Have It. We were clerks of the court, possibly because the one person who would not be afraid to ring the bell to stop Uncle Alex speaking was his wee sister. But I will be honest, we were likely a wee bit more generous with his time, so sorry, David. On the 10-year anniversary of the referendum at a sold-out event at the IMAX in Glasgow, Uncle Alec was on top form. He had a way of bringing different people together and letting their voices be heard. And the truly magical thing about Uncle Alec was the fact that everybody gathered here is from a different walk of life. Not all of you shared his views, not all of you shared his politics, but you could all appreciate his fierce intellect, his sharp wit, his generosity of spirit, and his true love for Scotland and all things Scottish. Right up until the end, he was fighting to save Scotland's only oil refinery, working to reverse cuts to winter fuel payments for pensioners in Scotland and the rest of the UK, and championing Scotland on the international stage. He always said he was proud of us, but we were proud of him every single day. The world would be a much quieter place without Uncle Alec, for Moira, for the wider family, and for Scotland. Uncle Alec passing means a great loss for many, a loss of Scotland's voice on the international stage, a loss of integrity in Scottish politics, and a great loss to Scotland's independence movement. As a family, it is likely a loss we will never get over. A loss of someone to ring up, whether it be for a betting tip before the big race, or with a problem that you knew he could solve. For us, it's a loss of his stories round the dinner table, of family tales and Scottish history. A loss of his ever-optimistic view and his will to power on. But as a family, we will endeavour to continue his life's work and the things left unfinished.
Now, in your words for Uncle Alec, as you speak of him, you talked a lot about Linlithgow, where he came from, and so tell us then, where is the special ALBA Party Memorial going to take place?
So this ALBA Party Memorial is going to take place in the Linlithgow Rose Football Club social rooms. And that's really, really special because Uncle Alec grew up just a stone's throw away. It's a very special place for the family. I've got really happy memories there visiting my grandparents when I was growing up. And it's a place that's really special for the family also because in the club there's a wall, and it's a family wall, and it's got names on it. And a few years ago, my other uncle bought each of the family a brick on that wall. So Uncle Alec's name is on that wall as well.
So for Alba Party members, they're going to be able to register online, and we'll have the information at the end of the show for them to do so, and obviously we'll hear from the Alba Party email. So just tell us the date and the place.
So it's very special. It's going to be on Burns Weekend. It's going to be on Sunday the 26th January, and it's going to be in Lithgow.
So thank you very much indeed, Christina, for giving us that information. As I say, people will be able to register to attend the event. We look forward to hearing from you and other family members and indeed Alba Party members. And hopefully, Christina, you'll come on the show in the new year. I'd explained to our viewers that out of respect for Alex, we were just going to continue with the set for a short period of time, and then in the new year, subject to the family being happy, which you are, we'll have a new set and a new opportunity to remember Alex and talk about all of his achievements and talk about achieving independence for Scotland. And I hope to be able to welcome you back into the show then. Lovely. Thank you so much, Christina. So thank you very much to Christina. We can look forward to hearing from her in the new year. And with that, and as I've said, I'm going to endeavour to continue this show in Alex's name as we remember all of what he did for Scotland and all of what he wants us to do for Scotland as we take his name forward. So on behalf of all of us here at the show, can I take the opportunity to wish you all a happy, healthy and safe Christmas and New Year, and be assured that Alex's name will live on into 2025 and beyond as we continue with the show. And as he would say, bye for now, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you so much for watching and for your support.